This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at McCabe Law LLC of Portland, Maine. If you're looking at getting involved in either the Maine or Massachusetts legal marijuana markets, you need to make a call to the experts over at McCabe Law LLC of Portland, Maine before you get started. Their full-service boutique law firm is able to handle every aspect of starting a legal marijuana business, from getting all your operating licenses set up through securing your lease and finally opening your doors to the public. Swing over to McCabeLawLLC.com to learn more. That's spelled McCabe LawLLC.com. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Friday, June 30th, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 280 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day is a delicious bit of Schadenfreude, as prohibitionist head vampire Kevin Sabet, leader of the prohibitionist group Smarter Approaches to Marijuana, or SAM as they're otherwise known, managed to show off his total and complete lack of understanding of the federal legislative process when SAM released a statement on Wednesday celebrating what they thought was a huge victory against progressive marijuana reform. In the release, SAM said, quote, "A proposed government spending bill released today eliminated a provision that has protected the marijuana industry from federal prosecution for violating the Controlled Substances Act," unquote. Sam and Kevin then went on to blast their supposed win all over social media, with Kevin writing on Twitter, quote, "Breaking. Congress strips provision barring DOJ from spending money to enforce pot laws. This is a big change," unquote. The only problem with Sam's storyline is that it's not true at all. As Tom Angel points out in an excellent and thoroughly researched takedown piece of Kevin over at MassRoots, the amendment Sam is talking about, which you might recognize as the Rohrabacher-Farr/Blumenauer Act, and that protects medical marijuana from federal prosecution, was never introduced at this part of the legislative process. Tom writes, quote, "They've always been added via strong bipartisan amendment votes later in the process on the House floor and or in the Senate Appropriations Committee," unquote. This is one of those must-click over to read stories. Nice job, Tom. Alicia Wallace over at the Cannabist has a really interesting story up looking at the fallout from a recent large-scale police bust of an alleged marijuana cultivation and trafficking organization in Colorado. Alicia's piece doesn't examine the aftermath for those caught up in the arrests or those who worked to take them down, but rather on an uninvolved third-party company who happened to share the name of the official police investigation. Yesterday, I reported on the so-called Operation Toker, in which 62 people were arrested on suspicion of operating a large-scale marijuana trafficking organization. Police said they chose the name Operation Toker due to the fact that many of the defendants played poker together. Unfortunately, the name Toker also happens to be the name of a small company in Colorado that produces a tool by the same name for marijuana consumers to poke out their clogged and spent bowls and pipes. As Alicia's reporting, life for the husband and wife team behind the company Toker got a little bit more complicated once news of Operation Toker started hitting the news waves. This is another good one to click over to. Our final top story of the day is news out of Massachusetts that state lawmakers failed yesterday to come up with a compromise bill to legalize the adult use of marijuana as mandated by voters in the fall. As I've reported on extensively in recent days, 6 Massachusetts legislators have been meeting all week behind closed doors in an effort to meld a bill from the 2 disparate versions that were passed out of the state House and Senate. They had been working to hit a self-imposed deadline of last night so as to give the state enough time to set up rules and regulations for how the system will work on the ground level, but threw in the towel last night around 9 p.m. after failing to find a compromise. This is a hugely dynamic situation that we'll obviously keep tracking. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, McCabe Law LLC of Portland, Maine. One of the things that clients of Chris McCabe and his team at McCabe Law appreciate about working with them is the fact that even though they are a smaller boutique firm, they have national flex and reach thanks to their of-counsel relationship with industry giant Hoban Law. If you manage to find some aspect of the law that McCabe Law can handle, and good luck with that, they would simply hit up their network at Hoban Law and boom, you'd be covered. Put that magical combination of a small boutique firm with a giant's national might to work for you. Just open up McCabeLawLLC.com to learn more. That's McCabe Law LLC.com. All right, time for the blitz. Swinging out west to Hawaii, we have news that the state's largest workers' compensation insurer is bailing out on all 7 of its medical marijuana customers, citing fears of a federal crackdown. The big problem with that is that there are only 8 dispensaries in the whole state, leaving most of the industry potentially hobbled even before they're able to open their doors. State law requires medical marijuana dispensaries to carry workers' compensation insurance, so the affected dispensaries will need to find coverage before they'd be able to open up. Courier-Journal is a good story up telling the tale of Johnny Boone, the leader of the so-called Cornbread Mafia, a marijuana cultivators collective that pooled money, resources, and knowledge to build a large-scale growing and distribution network throughout the Midwest. Mr. Boone was arrested in Canada in December and hauled back to Kentucky to face charges of growing more than 2,400 marijuana plants. He faces up to life in prison if convicted. This is an interesting one to dive into fully. As always, we have all the news linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com and on our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily. The state of Pennsylvania announced yesterday the winners of the first 27 medical marijuana dispensary licenses to be given out for their nascent medical marijuana program, which will come online later next year. The AP pulled together a list of the 27 winners and nicely popped them onto a handy map. Swing over to the Cannabist to check that out and to find a link for more details on all the winners. Yesterday, the state of West Virginia announced the appointment of a medical marijuana advisory board set to help craft the rules and regulations for their newly forming medical marijuana program. The state appointed a total of 13 members to the board, which will be led up by Department of Health and Human Services Commissioner Dr. Rahul Gupta. The board will start working on rules for growing and processing first to allow licensed providers to get a jump on putting seed to soil. Regular listeners know that banking and the access to business banking services continues to be an issue that plagues the marijuana industry, with most traditional banks avoiding doing business with legal marijuana companies due to fear of federal prosecution. There have been a handful of banks and credit unions willing to buck the trend to engage with legal marijuana, but so far they've been few and far between. The Cannabist has a story up about one such credit union, the Fourth Quarter Credit Union, that was set up explicitly to service the legal marijuana industry, and that was recently on the receiving end of a good ruling by a federal judge that, to make a long story short, allows them to once again apply for a so-called master's account with the Federal Reserve System. That master's account is required before any bank or credit union can actually act like a bank or credit union. We'll report back as their quest for official bankitude resolves. Oregon Business is reporting that the state of Oregon is far behind its marijuana state peers when it comes to the transparency of the legal marijuana industry's data, with the blame falling squarely on the Oregon Liquor Control Commission for failing to make sales, cultivator, and other basic data points publicly available. This contrasts with Washington State, which puts out a regular flow of sales and tax data broken down to individual stores. And finally for today, the New Haven Register has a great editorial article up written by Rabbi Shaul Marshall Praver and Reverend Alexander E. Sharp, in which the two members of the clergy come out in support of taxing and regulating adult use marijuana in the state of Connecticut. They write, quote, "Legalization would make our communities safer. Illegal marijuana sales are the foundation for criminal markets that operate in every community in our state. They're responsible for much of the violence that afflicts our urban areas. Marijuana legalization would reduce crime just as it did when we decided to end our national ill-conceived prohibition of alcohol." Unquote. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, McCabe Law of Portland, Maine, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing on over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.